Hello everyone, my name is Michael SK, and welcome back to Umineko When They Cry, Episode 4. We are technically kind of done with Episode 4, but just like the previous episodes, we've got the tea party section to go through, and then the mysterious question mark section to go through after. Then we will surely be done with Episode 4, and not only that, but we'll be done with the questions arc. We'll finally be done with that. Episodes 5 through 8 will be the answers arc, and I really do hope we get some answers right off the bat in Episode 5. Thinking back on Higurashi, it did, explain some things. It started to, pull the curtain back a little bit, I guess you could say, once we got into Chapter 5 and saw a different perspective of things. Whether or not we're just going through more games, or we have a different perspective, or what have you, I just hope we get something, because goddamn did this whole episode here raised a whole lot of questions, among other things. But yeah, we'll go into the Episode 4 tea party. I forgot that there was a little tea party menu here. If I knew, I just would have been waiting in here. So what do we have here? October 5th, 1986, the second day. All right. Are we just going to continue the story now? If that is the case, I'm down with that. Continue what we started for this one. Okay, we're just going very much forward in time here. Okay, we're past noon. We're getting really close to midnight here. Very close to midnight. Okay. We got 10 minutes. I don't have a clue what's going on. Hey, me too. Please, someone explain in a way even I can understand what happened yesterday. I was in the kitchen of the mansion grabbing some food without permission. If you open up that massive business class refrigerator, you can find anything. You can eat and drink as much as you like. Even if the typhoon didn't clear up for a week, I'd have more than enough to eat. With wine in one hand, I was helping myself to some dry-cured ham. I wonder just how expensive this wine and ham are. You ingredients are out of luck too. If only you'd had Goda-san to cook you, well, you could have been reborn as much more incredible food. I looked at the clock. Very soon, it will be midnight. October 5th, the second day, would end. The insane October 4th yesterday seemed like a lie. That's how much nothing had happened after that test thing. Nothing happened. No phone call came, and no letters came. No person came, and no one attacked me. Nothing happened at all. I want to start demanding a refund on all the time and energy that tension stole from me. Because after that, for an entire day, a full 24 hours, nothing happened. So surely, nothing's going to happen now. I don't know. It's always midnight on the second day where everything ends. A full 24 hours ago, Beatrice called me to the spot in front of the mansion's entrance. There I was given a strange test to determine the successor to the headship or whatever. I gave a serious answer in my own way, but it somehow hadn't meshed with the other side. Beatrice got pissed for no reason and fell silent. I yelled at her to try and say something, but she gave no answer. When I asked where Maria was, she just told me to go to the chapel and left. To tell the truth, it was an anticlimax. No matter what kind of weird test you give, at least tell me whether I've passed or failed. Are you trying to say thanks for coming, your results will be mailed to you later or something? Quit messing with me. Anyway, I then headed to the chapel. After failing their tests, both George Aniki and Jessica were killed. I couldn't let Maria get killed too. Also, I might get a chance to catch some person trying to kill her. As a little kid, I often heard from Jessica that you would get in trouble if you went near the chapel. So I had never been there, but I at least knew where it was. I couldn't find any trace of a person there, but there was a key bundle lying in front of the door. I thought this might be someone telling me to open the door, but after trying all the keys, I found that none of them fit. Wasn't this like an old style type of deal? I also called Maria's name, but there was no answer whatsoever. I searched around the chapel, but there was a limit to what I could do in the pitch black with just a flashlight. I realized that this key bundle might be a set of master keys, which could make it possible to open the door to the mansion. I found no sign of Maria, so I returned to the mansion. The mansion was wrapped in silence, and in a horrible stench. However, it's amazing how good humans are at adapting. The inside of the mansion must still be wrapped up in that smell. However, I grew completely used to it and stopped minding it. It didn't seem any worse than any old house where someone had burnt some meat. I have a feeling that that is in relation to Kinzo having been burnt alive yet again. That seems to be a very common occurrence. In like 3 of the 4 episodes, he was burned alive, or burned in general. So, could that tell us anything? You know, is that like a huge hint to maybe have here? I think it might be. At first I was bewildered by the stench, but I decided to head to the dining hall for the time being. And found those corpses that were so pitiful. Goda-san and the rest had hesitated to speak of them in detail. Well, here we go. We can't actually access the tips right now, but we can access the characters. Alright, so quite a few people got an update. Alright, so Natsuhi. Corpse discovered in the dining hall. Her head was half destroyed. It seems reasonable to think that she was murdered with something like a powerful gun. However, the witnesses don't believe that she was killed with a gun. And Ava, same deal. Witnesses don't believe that she was killed with a gun. Head half destroyed. Yep, powerful gun. Well, George was not here, but we already read his. We have Rudolph, same deal. Rosa, same deal. And Genji. Alright. It was the remains of Aunt Natsuhi and the others who had become the first victims. Half of each head had been completely split open. And it was so gruesome that even without knowing a thing about examining corpses, I could say that they were 100% dead. And on top of that, the remaining halves of their faces were left like normal, so it was even easy to identify them. Really convenient corpses these were. And in addition to those 6 bodies was one more. This 7th corpse was Maria. Okay. I had a feeling she wasn't alive anymore, but let's read hers. Corpse discovered in the dining hall, unable to locate any notable external wounds. Battlers speculated that it may have been some type of poisoning, the most peaceful method of inviting a person to the Golden Land. Well, that's a little bit of a new one, isn't it? She lay next to Aunt Rosa as though sleeping alongside her. I cried at the death of an innocent young girl, and at the cruel way my dad and the rest had died. I raced through the mansion swinging the hat-stand spear, yelling, "Come out here, bastard!" But I couldn't find any trace of anyone else. Thinking they might be planning to hide somewhere and attack me from behind, I went around searching for hiding places, sometimes growing more cautious, and sometimes intentionally letting my guard down in various ways, but in the end, not even a kitten appeared. This is so different, I have to say. This is so different. Then morning came. My tension and fatigue combined with my drowsiness, making for the worst kind of dawn. You know, this kind of reminds me of Chapter 3 in Higurashi. Humans are pretty incredible. Even when a murderer might be hiding somewhere, we prioritize drowsiness and fatigue over our own lives. By that time, I was starting to feel pretty ridiculous. After all, for a full 6 hours before dawn, I had walked around the mansion, yelling at the culprits to show themselves. My search had been a careful one, and I had tired myself out and let my guard down. Even so, no one came to attack me. Basically, I lost patience with them and figured that they could do whatever the hell they wanted. The boat won't come until the typhoon passes. They said on TV that it won't pass until tomorrow, so I've got another full day today. Lazying about lost its interest. And even though I knew it would be it would probably make the police mad, I decided to play detective a bit. That would just scare me more. Honestly, the whole situation would be scary. You're on a complete secluded island, absolutely nowhere to go. It is straight up pouring outside. You are truly disconnected from the rest of the world, but the TV fucking works somehow. That's the power of cable, or satellite, or the antenna, whatever. But we also have a bunch of corpses lying about of family, and also those that worked for the family, and also a friend of the family, and Dr. Najo. It would be very eerie, but I think given how everything went down, I mean, your heart's already broken. I think your mind would be as well. Just trying to wait out the day would just be surreal in a way. First was the dining hall, where the very first murder had occurred. The 6 who had been killed in the beginning really were pitiful. The weapon used was probably a gun. Maybe their heads were split by something powerful like a magnum bullet or a shotgun. It was a reasonable theory to hold. Yeah, I mean, given how the goons that were trying to attack Ange on Rokkenjima here in the future, how they kind of just went one by one, I'm thinking they were shot, maybe sniper rifle or something. But it had to have been a huge shot or something. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of. I'm just also thinking that because everybody died, and probably including Ange, the story could be told however the story wants to be told. Compared to that, the 7th corpse, Maria, had died in a much better and cleaner way. At a glance, I could see no external wounds and didn't understand how she had been killed. But by her mouth were traces of bubbles that she might have spat out, and it looked like a typical death by poisoning that you might see in a TV drama. Wasn't Maria called out to the chapel and given a test? So why was she in the corpse-filled dining hall lying next to her mother dead? Even if the cause of death was poison, who gave it to her? Her clothes were disturbed or weren't disturbed at all. It's hard to imagine that she was forcibly pushed down and given an injection of poison. It's probably better to assume that she was given a capsule of poison or something and made to swallow it. But compared to the scattered and violently mutilated corpses in this room, Maria's corpse was too clean. If they had a gun, well, they only needed to pull the trigger. But poisoning, whether by having her drink it or by an injection, would take a lot more effort. Considering the culprit's brutal nature, you would think Maria's death alone was given special treatment. Why was only Maria given a sleep-like death? True, being killed is always a pitiful thing, but for some reason, Maria's death alone seemed very courteous to me. Both of Maria's hands were joined on her chest, as though the dead person had put them there herself. Did Maria do that herself before dying? Isn't this usually something done by someone else after the person dies? As though sleeping with her mother, whose head was half crushed, Maria dozed in peace. For some reason, that contrast really bugged me. Including the direct cause, it's probably safe to say that Maria's death is shrouded in mystery. It kind of always has been. Maria didn't make it to the end in episode 3, but she did in 1, 2, and I guess technically this one. I would argue that she made it past the sacrificial deaths and therefore made it to the end. And more than anything, the biggest mystery of this dining hall was the pitfalls. The pitfalls that both Uncle Krause's group and Goda-san's had mentioned. After the first 6 were killed, 5 more fell through pitfalls and were captured. What are pitfalls? Those things that suddenly open and you fall through them, right? The room had a solid floor with a carpet that looked dignified if a bit worn out. No matter how you looked at it, it was single piece. If a pitfall had opened up, there would have to be a seam just in that place. And if there had been some trick like a pitfall, wouldn't it creak when you walked on it? No matter how much I walked around feeling the carpet, I just couldn't imagine that a pitfall was hidden there. Anyway, it'd be one thing if a single person fell, but a full 5 people did. By putting together everyone's stories, each one of them had fallen from a different location. So at the very least, there had to be 5 separate places with pitfalls. So what does this mean? Was this room actually made with pitfalls across the entire floor? So by pushing a button, you could open up a pitfall in the location of your choice? Some kind of contraption like that? That kind of ridiculous mechanism would be surprising even in a ninja mansion. But if Dad and the rest had heard about this, I wonder if they'd say, I wouldn't put it past grandfather to do it, to make it. At any rate, I didn't learn anything more from the dining hall. It is strange. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it before. The pitfalls. Were people, knocked out and dragged somewhere else? Or was the location that they were in not actually the location that they were in? It's crazy to think that there's some underground tunnel between the hidden mansion on one side of the island and this one as well. It's really hard to think about that. Or really just a hidden tunnel in general. But I guess if there is a hidden mansion, there could be more mysteries. I just wonder, how did they end up wherever it was that they ended up? Do the pitfalls not exist? Or do they exist, but I just can't find them, amateur that I am? I can't say for sure. Since they claim that the pitfalls were there, I can't ignore them even if I can't find them. What are we just gonna get a fucking hammer and start, chugging away? The next ones to be killed were Jessica and George Aniki. I had discovered George Aniki when I had been called out for my test. He had been called out to the arbor in the rose garden and probably shot in the forehead with a gun. Nice, nice. But what about Jessica? Jessica had been called to her own room on the 2nd floor of the mansion. She's going to have a similar wound, right? The door to her room was locked. That wasn't a problem at all since I had a master key. Nope, there she is. Inside the room, it was horrible. But after the dining hall, I was used to corpses, so I had built up a bit of an immunity. The phone receiver was loose and dangling. Had she been killed while still on the phone with me? Jessica was leaning against the wall right next to it, with half of her head split open. Alright. We're filling in all the gaps here, I guess. This whole page is going to be red at the end of this all, I suppose. Though I'm pretty sure that we should have Goda's and Kumasawa's in red, but I guess until he's in the actual room with them to confirm that yes, they are 100% dead, they aren't going to be shaded in red like this. Okay, Jessica, there she is. Corpse discovered in her own room on the 2nd floor of the mansion. Her head was half destroyed. It seems reasonable to think that she was murdered with something like a powerful gun. Destroyed herself with her own strike with George's counterattacking type barrier. Right, of course. A lot of people here seem to be dying by a gun. Everybody here. The mark is on their head. Even George. Even Jessica. Maria's the exception, though. As far as I could tell by glancing at the scene, it looked as though she had been killed while on the phone. In that case, had the culprit been right there before her eyes? Another thing, and we've seen this so many times before, but this is a closed room situation. I think our first one here, well, not counting Goda and Kumasawa, I just think they straight up committed suicide. Hard to tell yet. We got to get in there first. And even then, I don't know. There is a blood splatter on the wall back there, just throwing that out there, so I don't know. It's not like half her face melted and she died or whatever. It is as if, like, something, blasted her face. Like a gun. I hadn't gotten that impression while listening to Jessica's voice over the phone. I'm pretty sure Jessica said, "They got me." It's probably best to assume that she had already received a fatal wound at the time of the phone call. That's right, she also had said this.
バトラーが来た時には私は頭を半分ぶちまけた死体だよ
Sorry, I was getting a drink of water. Yes, that is what she had said. From what I could tell by looking at Jessica's corpse, there were no wounds on her other than the damage to her head. Could she have had an injury serious enough to make her prepared for death, and then died halfway through the phone call? But the way that she had talked on the phone made me think that she had escaped harm for the time being. You shouldn't be able to have a casual conversation over a phone if the culprit's right before your eyes. Plus, we didn't hear like a blast or anything on the phone, right? So how did she die? So did the culprit come in part way through the phone call and kill Jessica? We would have heard something. No, that can't be right. After all, this room was locked. Wait, that doesn't tell me anything. If the culprit stole a master key from one of the victims, locking the door would be meaningless. But she had no external wounds other than her head. In that case, should I assume that the fatal wound she was prepared to die from and the actual external wound that damaged her head were two different things? And that both of them were made to the same part of the body? In other words, Jessica was struck severely to the head and received an incredibly bad wound. Then she called me and either lost consciousness or died while on the phone. Then the culprit came and damaged her head again. Something like that. I don't know. After being called to this room, Jessica was attacked by the culprit and received a serious injury. Then the culprit thought that she had been killed and went away for the time being. But Jessica miraculously started breathing again and called me with what would become her dying message. Then the culprit realized that they had failed to kill her and rushed back to deliver the final blow after Jessica fell unconscious from massive blood loss. I mean, maybe that seems to add up more or less, except for how Jessica was able to accurately predict the nature of that final blow. I also can't remember from episode 2, was it? Was it episode 2? I want to say it was episode 2. How Jessica's room is locked, because that was a huge point in that one. I don't remember how that all went down. I think a master key would work in locking and unlocking her room, but I remember there being a bit of confusion on that one. And there was one more thing that bugged me about the phone call from Jessica. Jessica had said this. She said it almost as though she had witnessed George Aniki being killed. Well, in what we saw, yeah, it's basically because she killed him. But while you certainly could see the rose garden from the window in Jessica's room, you could even see the roof of the arbor where George Aniki had been summoned. It was very far away. Add on the fact that it was the night of a typhoon, and it's very hard to imagine that she was able to witness everything that happened by the arbor from this window. And more than anything else, Jessica left before George Aniki. She shouldn't have known that George Aniki's test took place by the arbor. Why did Jessica know that George Aniki had been killed? It is strange, isn't it? Also, during my search of the entire mansion, I found Kirie-san's corpse as well. Yeah, she was in this guest room here. Corpse discovered in a guest room inside the mansion. There was a single hole right in the center of her forehead. It seems reasonable to think that she was shot with a gun or something. A demon stake was rammed into her forehead, but it is difficult to imagine that this was the cause of death. I didn't miss. I missed on purpose to torment her. Oh, okay, so that's a little message for the, from the rabbits. I'm probably going to get a little bit more of those as we discover the other corpses, but that will maybe lead us to the mysterious hidden mansion. It was in one of the old guest rooms at the back of the first floor. In the past, before the construction of the guest house, the relatives had spent the night in these. Kirie-san's situation matched Jessica's perfectly. She had probably been killed during her phone call with me. The receiver was hanging untidily, and Kirie-san lay crumpled in that corner. But the way that she had been killed was very different from Jessica. Her head wasn't smashed. Instead, a stake with an occult design was buried into her forehead. It was so gruesome, so I pulled it out. I wish you wouldn't. I wish you wouldn't have. After pulling it, I realized that this might get me into trouble with the police later. So, a little too late, I set it down by Kirie-san's side. Its tip was sharp and stained with enough blood that it must have penetrated fully to the brain. I didn't know what kind of metal it was made of, but it was about as heavy as a paperweight. Certainly, if you were stabbed all out with something like this, it might cause a terrible wound. Yeah, I think it was really fucking stupid of Battler to do what he just did, but I think as long as he doesn't touch the other ones, we'll be okay. But stakes are still being used here, even so the Seven Sisters of Purgatory were not involved in any of this, supposedly. I probably knew what that stake meant. It's one of those, the style of killing from the Fourth Twilight onwards in the Witch's Epitaph. It's probably that gouge with a stake and kill thing. However, a human skull is very firm. No matter how much someone mustered their strength, could it really have been pierced so neatly? No. But by my reasoning, this stake wasn't the cause of death, but had just been used to damage the corpse after death. She was probably killed with a gun or something like George Haneke, and the stake had been stuck into the hole left by the gun. Thinking of it that way makes it easier to accept. But was Kirie-san really killed with a gun? As she said on the phone, even though she was holed up inside a locked room, Kirie-san was being attacked. In fact, this room had been locked. Also, she mentioned a gold thread or something flying in and attacking her. In fact, there were 4 places around Kirie-san's corpse with holes that could have been caused by some kind of attack. But still, a gold thread attacked her. Through the keyhole? Even so, this picture of a door doesn't have a keyhole. Let's just pretend that there is. I looked at the door from Kirie-san's perspective. If it had been one of those old keyholes that you see in old mystery movies, where you can peek through to the other side, then it would have clearly been possible to stick something through it. But even though the doors in this mansion were old-fashioned, the locks were the familiar average cylinder style that you can find in any normal house. In other words, they weren't constructed in a way that would let you penetrate through them. So no matter how thin an object you might try to stick through the keyhole, it's unthinkable that something penetrated through from the outside and attacked. A cylinder lock and a keyhole? But despite that, Kirie-san definitely said that something like a golden thread had flown in through the keyhole, spun around while aiming for her and attacked her. A golden thread attacking through a keyhole. I couldn't understand what it meant at all. But even so, Kirie-san probably predicted that I wouldn't be able to understand all this. And it wasn't just Kirie-san. Jessica said it over the phone too. No, since the very beginning, from the time we talked with Goda-san and Kumasawa-san and got a phone call from Uncle Krause's group, everyone has said the same consistent thing. Grandfather summoned witches and demons and is killing people with magic. They had been shown that right before their eyes. These weren't tricks or fakes. There was no choice but to believe it. With one voice, they had all said that. Yeah, everybody was on board because they had seen it this time around. Episodes 1 through 3, there were always those that were like, yeah, right. Episode 2, all the servants were on board that, yeah, there is magic, there is all this crazy bullshit. Episode 3, everybody left were the family members in Nanjo. Kinzo and the servants were all dead. So everybody should have been in full agreement, minus Maria, that there's no witches, there's no magic. They had the strongest chance of survival because, well, in this case of the story perspective, their toxin was so strong, they should have been fine. But they just kept playing their games, or their cards in this game, totally wrong. When the mystery woman called herself Beatrice appeared, even I had pretty much believed that she was a real witch and might start summoning goat monsters right and left. However, after being left alone for a whole day, my feeling of tension had faded completely. I was now able to think that something so stupid definitely couldn't be true. Did they lose their heads in a little in an extraordinary situation where their lives were exposed to danger, and mistakenly think that a witch was attacking them with magic? But multiple people gave the same kind of testimony, and on top of that, none of their opinions conflicted each other. If it had just been a single statement, I'd be able to suspect that they just didn't see what they thought they saw. But doing that now is pretty difficult. Yeah, that is the tough part there. Then right next to the back door, I found Uncle Kraus with his head half smashed. Yep, we're following the path now. Alright. Corpse discovered in the vicinity of the mansion's back entrance. His head was half destroyed. It seems reasonable to think that he was murdered with something like a powerful gun. A demon stake was rammed into the destroyed portion of his head. None can escape the Chester's golden arrows. Even though he had escaped the dungeon of Kuadorian, and somehow made it this far by a secret underground passage, he had been killed. Buried into the gruesome cross-section of of his half-crushed head was a stake with an occult design, like the one that had been buried into Kirie-san's forehead. Don't take it out this time. And in this situation, it was very hard to imagine that this stake was the weapon used. He had been killed with a powerful gun like the six in the dining hall, and after death had been jabbed with a stake like Kirie-san. I wonder if the golden threads that Kirie-san spoke of attacked Uncle Kraus too. Does there exist some kind of tool, like an endoscope, that's very thin but can be moved about at will? And that can also attack people? No way. I've never heard of anything like that. But even so, if this fact had been revealed to one of the relatives, maybe they'd say, I wouldn't put it past grandfather to make it. Since I can't deny the existence of Golden Thread X that can be moved at will and attack people, I can either accept that this mysterious weapon exists, or else I'll have to accept that this was a murder committed with magic. To find the next corpse, I had to go out through the back door and search around outside a bit. That should get us to our tunnel, right? Or are we going on the path to... Oh, there we go. Behind the mansion, in the wild-grown bushes that were almost swallowed up by the forest, there was something like an old well. Oh, fuck, man. They're just down there. And right next to it were Dr. Nanjo and Shannon-chan's corpses. Let's read those ones. Alright, so Nanjo, corpse discovered behind the mansion. His head was half destroyed, gun, a demon stake was lying next to the corpse, but he doesn't have a little message. Not this one. Shannon does. The witnesses understand one thing at least. It was not the stake that killed her. Yeah, that is true. Both corpses had their heads smashed. And though they weren't stuck in, there were stakes lying right next to each damaged head. Each corpse was atrocious, but having to look directly at Shannon-chan's lovely face, which had been half blown away, was very painful. Then there was the well. I had heard that inside it was a secret underground passage to the mysterious mansion Kuadorian. By this time, I'd begun to think that Beatrice and her accomplices might have used this underground passage and left for Kuadorian. Even though there had apparently been at least 10 of them, I hadn't seen a trace of anyone. It seemed very likely that they had already escaped to a different location. There's the typhoon. They can't go out to sea. It goes the same for the forest. There's no way they could traverse such a deep, uncultivated forest on foot. In that case, they had only one place to go: the mysterious hidden mansion to adore in. Through the secret underground passage at the bottom of the well. By this time, I had entirely lost my fear of being killed if I happened to come across the enemy. Don't fuck with me. This time I'll storm into your mansion. Can we not open it? The old well had a firm cover on it. The cover was an iron grill. The gaps between the bars were perhaps 20 centimeters across. You could peer inside, but it really wasn't something a human could pass through. If I hadn't known better, I wouldn't have thought it anything more than a simple cover to prevent falls. But from what Kirie-san had told me, I knew that its purpose was to prevent intruders from entering the secret underground passage and its depths. But the cover was extremely firm and rigid, and no matter how much I pushed or pulled, I couldn't even get close to opening it. I couldn't find any obvious locks. It might be sealed by some mechanism, but no matter how much I investigated it, I couldn't find anything to release it. The biggest piece of information Kirie-san had tried to give me, gambling her final moments, was the underground passage in this well. I had an idea. After all, I had seen the various tools in the gardening shed when we had locked Goda-san and Kumasawa-san in there. Yeah, I mean, going in there is one thing, but I mean, they're also in there. But the shutter to the gardening shed was locked. On top of that, the key was with Goda-san, who was dead on the inside. In other words, this gardening shed was a closed room. There's no way to open it from the outside. In that case, I've got to break the shutter. There has to be a tool for that somewhere. Kind of feels like I'm going in circles here. Yeah, I have to agree with him on that one. Then while searching for that, I learned that the source of the stench that had permeated the mansion this whole time was the underground boiler room. The boiler room was dimly lit, humid, smelled horrible, and on top of that, was incredibly creepy. But there were several large tools there, and I managed to find a fire hatchet and some massive wire cutters. And grandfather's corpse. There it is. We're really making our way through this. We've almost got them all. So Kinzo is obviously going to be the different one, as has always been the case. Discovered as a burnt corpse from the incinerator in the underground boiler room. As there were no signs that he fought to get out of the incinerator, it seems reasonable to think that he was burned after he was murdered. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes, the dead to the dead. Okay, a little prediction here. This probably won't seem like much. I believe Kinzo is indeed dead from the get-go. I do not believe that he is ever alive during any of this. Straight up, every episode. Can I, address every situation? Probably not. just straight up, no. But I don't think that he was ever alive to begin with. The person that was supposedly seen by everybody was not Kinzo. Just straight up, could not have been Kinzo. The way that this character acted is not the way that we saw him in the very, very beginning of episode 1. It's not even the same as what we saw when we supposedly saw him talking with Nanjo or Genji or whoever else in the previous episodes as well. This just did not seem like Kinzo. And for him to always consistently be burned, and sure, episode 2 is a little bit of a different case, but who's to say that he wasn't burned in that one either? I don't know. I don't think that he was actually alive, and him always being burned, that being the way that we find him, it's very, very suspicious compared to everybody else, in my opinion. And there's more things to go along with it here, but I'll continue to hold off as I gather all my thoughts, because there's a whole lot here, guys. There really is. No, strictly speaking, I should probably say that I found a burnt corpse of a person who was probably grandfather. Someone's corpse had been stuffed into the blazing fires of the boiler. However, by coincidence, I was able to notice the number of toes on the corpse. Both feet had 6 toes. That's right. I think I heard it from Dad some time ago. Something about grandfather having polydactyly, or with extra toes. According to old Ushiromiya family tradition, it seems that those with extra fingers or toes had some kind of good fortune and were treated as a good omen. And because of that, grandfather was selected to be the successor or something. Weird reason to go about it, but whatever. But I wonder if I can be certain that this is grandfather's body just from the number of toes. After all, grandfather was supposed to be the leader of the group of culprits. I didn't have a clue why he'd get stuffed into a boiler in a place like this and die. Well, that kind of goes back to the whole, if there actually are, a select amount of humans, huge emphasis on humans, and one of them was actually never alive, then that leaves room for somebody else. And that's not to say that that means all the family members and all the servants and Nanjo that they're in the clear. No, that just means that there's room for somebody else. Somebody we don't know of. A mysterious corpse burning and spitting out a terrible stench amid the flames. If it really was grandfather, did that mean that the leader of the group of culprits wasn't grandfather, but that Beatrice after all? Grandfather was used because he was convenient, and was then thrown away? Unfortunately, it didn't look like I'd be given a chance to hear grandfather's side of the story. I don't think we want anybody else's side of the story here, unfortunately. Like, the problem here is that everybody says that they had seen all these consistent things, but now that everybody is dead and we've moved on, here we are and we're not seeing a single bit of anything. It's just a whole bunch of people that died. And that secret passage, I'm going to bet you guys that there's just going to be a corpse of a young boy down there and no secret passage to Kuwadorian. Straight up. And what does that tell us? That tells us that everybody has been doing things that they think that they're doing, that they know where they are, or an idea that they can actually describe to other people, but they're not. And everything that they're seeing, despite it all being the same thing that others are saying, or others that are able to see as well, everybody is linked in their story. Everybody is in the wrong. Everybody is not seeing what is actually there before them. They're not where they are. They're not doing what they think that they're doing. Now that I had obtained a tool, I thought about rushing to take on the cover to the well, but I decided to break the shutter to the gardening shed first. I had plenty of time to kill anyway. I figure I should check on the condition of Goda-san's and Kumasawa-san's corpses. Yeah, this will be fun to see. I hit the shutter with the hatchet, breaking into it. Stuck the wire cutter into the crack and scissored it around, opening up a hole. Then I faced Goda-san and Kumasawa-san's corpses once more, and this time we for sure confirm it. But is there anything additional, I wonder? There fucking is, baby! Alright, corpse discovered in the Rose Garden storehouse. It is hypothesized that he was shot in the forehead and then strung up by his neck. They themselves put their necks in the nooses. It was an interesting experience to try on occasion. As long as a locked room could be constructed, anything would have sufficed. What the fuck, man? Well, this really changes quite a bit of it, doesn't it? You can argue that a whole lot of people were shot and killed, or at least at one point, a bullet put into their heads or whatever. But this was a true closed room, more so than Jessica's. As a result, I learned a new fact. First, they had not died by being hung by the neck. Well, maybe. We don't know. Both of their feet were solidly on the floor. And on both of their foreheads were signs that they had been shot with a gun. The loop seemed longer than a normal noose. And on top of that, the length was different on each to match the height of each person. In other words, the lengths had been adjusted so that both Goda-san, who was tall, and Kumasawa-san, who was short, had their feet solidly but barely on the ground. Also, while the ropes carried both of their weights as their heads lolled, Both of them had some slack below their knees. This meant that if they stood up with these loops around their necks, there would have been some extra length. In other words, these loops wouldn't have been that great for hanging people. The direct cause of death was probably a shot to the head. It was gruesome. Their insides were still dripping out from these gaping holes, staining their faces a deep red. And it's probably best to assume that they were then hung, pulled up, and then left exposed like that. If they had been shot with a gun, they would probably have been lying down on the floor. If that had been the case, you wouldn't have been able to tell that they were dead even if you peeked through the window. The mountain of stuff would have gotten in the way, so if they'd been lying down, they would have been hidden. To make the deaths of these two known to the rest of us who couldn't go inside, they would have had to hang them like this, making it visible from the outside, which is so strange. They wanted those looking, in from the shutter to know. Was this done to get back at us for thinking that those two would surely be safe if we left the key with them? I wonder where the shutter key we gave Goto-san, which should have ensured their safety, is now. That key was in the pocket of his trousers. The gardening shed key had been kindly left there, and even the plate was attached. In other words, the gardening shed had been a closed room after all. And that gave rise to another question. Because this can't be explained by a hanging. If they didn't commit suicide, then those nooses were set up by the culprit. It might have been possible to shoot them through the window, but it's really unthinkable that someone could have tied two loops to the beam from the outside. The only thing I can think of, which is probably unlikely, and probably all my predictions so far haven't been all that great. Just smacked my microphone, sorry. There could be a person in here with them. Did we ever confirm that there was not another person in here? The only thing I can think of is that somebody was waiting for them in here and therefore would still be in here with them, killed them, and hung them up, and just made it look like it was a closed room. But we don't have Beatrice here to, give us the red text. And furthermore, there's no way they could have lifted up the heavy corpses. In other words, to do all of this, they would have had to go inside. But the key was in Goto-san's pocket, and the shutter had been locked. In other words, the gardening shed had been a closed room. Goto-san had said that there was only one key to this shutter, but is it possible that there was a copy and that the culprit was in possession of it? If we're allowed to theorize that there actually was a duplicate of the gardening shed or the gardening storehouse key, and that Goto-san just didn't know about it, then this isn't even close to a closed room. We just interpret it as one. But why is it that despite the fact that almost all of the other corpses were shot to death and left almost completely alone, just these two corpses were intentionally hoisted up? I couldn't help but feel something a bit odd about that. After this, if we assume that the mystery corpse in the boiler was grandfather's, the deaths of 16 people have been confirmed. There were 18 people on this island. I'm here, and there are 16 corpses. Kanun-kun's corpse is the only one I haven't been able to confirm. We're about to, though. We're about to. Let's go back to the well. I'm gonna get a drink of water. There's a lot of talking in this one. A lot of talking. Because everybody's dead. According to Kirie-san, he had been killed while climbing out of the well and had fallen down into it. So, with the well closed up like this, it's impossible to check. I tried shining a flashlight through the bars down into the darkness in the depths of the well, but it seemed that the jet black darkness had no intention of showing me its depths with a light of that level. It looked like I'd have to break the bars after all. Using the hatchets and things I had dragged from the boiler room and the gardening shed, I tried breaking the cover of the well. This has probably been like the spookiest video I've had to record of Umineko so far, just because of the fact that we are absolutely alone. No witches, no magic beings running around, it's just Battler on an island full of corpses and a lot of mysteries. but the metal bars were extraordinarily sturdy and breaking them wasn't easy. I hit them with the hatchet over and over until my hands started feeling weird and eventually gave up on breaking them. It's impossible. If they were at least wood, I might have been able to break them. But this metal... So that begs the question, where did these guys come from? And if Kanun is actually down there, that raises so many fucking questions. That's right. There's no way you can slice through metal bars like butter with a human strength. I can't even begin to understand that story about how Kanun-kun cut through metal bars. I heard that a light like a red laser beam grew out of his arm, and that he sliced through the metal bars like he was cutting through butter. Cutting through metal bars like butter? And what's with the red laser beam? Does that mean he secretly had a burner on him or something? And used that to burn through the bars? No, he had a lightsaber. Still, just what kind of laser could cut through metal bars like butter? It almost sounds like the kind of laser beam that you'd find in those robot anime that I'd love as a kid, doesn't it? Does something like that actually exist? And how did Kanun-kun get that laser beam? No matter how much I wanted to ask him, he's already been killed. Plus, even his corpse is now in the depths of the well beyond this cover. If Kanun-kun could slice through metal bars, I'm sure he could handle this metal cover in a single swing. It feels just like the closed room that Goto-san was locked in while holding the key. Only one person can open the door, but they're locked inside. If only I had that power of Kanun-kun's, and be able to do something about this cover myself. Just who is Kanun-kun? He couldn't really be a non-human being capable of using a strange power, right? Kirie-san told me to believe in witches, and I even met an insane woman calling herself one. Could Kanun-kun possibly be a human on the witch's side? Or else the culprit? I mean, he was questioned a little bit in episode 1. He was actually very much accused in episode 2, but you can blame Rosa on that one. What the heck? Am I gonna start treating him like the culprit just because I can't find his corpse? The thing is, if we find his corpse somewhere else... Hello, Beatrice. You know, if we find his corpse somewhere else than where they stated it was, then that goes back in my idea of nobody knew what the fuck was actually happening this entire time. Okay, well, that's helpful at least. Let's see it. Everybody but Battler. Everybody. Battler could not discover his corpse. Killing him with magic is all very well, but without a corpse, he will inevitably be a suspect. Truly anti-fantasy. Which is why I guaranteed his death with the red truth. Truly anti-mystery. Okay, just like how we saw it. No, we hear you loud and clear, Beatrice. Ain't that right, guys? Can I get a hell yeah in the comments? Please? And only that? Like nothing else? That'd be really funny. At a glance, this was a mass murder due to something strange that could only be thought of as magic. Golden threads that attacked through keyholes. No. We even have testimony that something gold flew around the dining hall when the first 6 died. The 2 might have been the same weapon. Then there was the closed room murder of the garden shed and the laser beam that could cut metal bars. And that wasn't all. There was much, much more, like the group of goat monsters, the story of a witch who could create pitfalls just by snapping her fingers, the rabbit-like demons who had fired golden threads. I think there was more, but each part was all screwed up. I'm surprised he remembers any of it. I couldn't possibly accept it, and was forced to suspect that it was some kind of trick or mistake. But why in the world had everyone spoken with one voice, saying the same thing without contradictions in their testimony? It's not only the magic. There's Maria's mysterious death. Why Jessica knew that George Aniki had been killed. The mysterious burnt corpse that I could not confirm really belonged to that damn geezer. And more and more. That's all made up to seem like this was all really done with magic, huh? That the perspective that we saw was fact. All stuff I don't get. I tilted the wine bottle up and gulped. I don't have a clue what's going on. After dinner last night, the kids were chased out and told to go back to the guest house. And then there was a massacre in the dining hall. Kirie-san said, and the rest were dropped through pitfalls and captured. Then Jessica and George Aniki were called out to take a test or whatever and killed. Even though Kirie-san's group was able to escape the dungeon somehow, all of them got killed in the end. And at the very, very end, even Maria was killed, leaving me all alone. In short, I did nothing except stay locked up in the guest house. During that time, a huge incident occurred and ended. What can I call it except incomprehensible? I don't have a clue anymore.
もう俺はただの食欲魔人なんだぜ。俺だけ生き残らせるつもりかよ。とっとと姿を現して殺しに来いってんだ。もう面倒だからこっちからは探さねえぞ。そっちから正体を見せやがるってんだ。俺は逃げも隠れもしねえぞ。矢でも鉄砲でも持ってきやがれ。
I haven't gotten any sleep since yesterday, so I'm incredibly sleepy. You want to kill me? Go ahead. I decided to return to the guest house and boldly rest in a bed. When I exited the kitchen and passed through the lobby, that portrait of the witch came into view. The big clock did too. It was almost exactly midnight, or where we were in episode 1. Oh, here we go. Then, the sound of the bell rang out proclaiming that midnight had arrived. As I listened, I looked up at Beatrice's portrait. Exactly 24 hours ago, I met you. What were you trying to say? And where did you go? Just who in the world are you? Golden Witch Beatrice. I haven't solved a single one of the riddles surrounding you. Show yourself and fight me. But alas, there will be no fight. Oh wait, no, hold on, maybe there will be. Then the witch showed herself. Like a guest of honor finally appearing, she showed herself on the landing at the top of the big staircase. So this won't wrap up.
ようやく姿を現しやがったな。丸一日。退屈させられてたところだぜ。
そうだ。丸一日を与えた人間側の権利行使は十分か。
ああ、退屈だったんでな。存分にやらせてもらったぜ。
エンジェは良い子まであったな。
エンジェの名をお前が口にするんじゃね
え。あれは奇跡によって現れ、自らを生贄にして、そなたに絶対の勝利の執念を与えた。
エンジェの名を口にするな。
あの無残な死は、そなたにとって必要なものだった。あの死を見なければ、そなたは本気にならぬ。エンジェの幸薄き未来を自覚しなければ、そなたに勝利の執念は生まれない。
エンジェの名を口にするなと言っている。
つまりは必要な生贄だったというわけだ。そうでなくては、そなたにわらわを殺すほどの怒りは生まれない。わらわとそなたの拮抗が崩せない。ベルンカステル教ね。これは駒ではないわ。切り札と呼ぶがふさわしい。
I want to say that that's kind of what she called it too.
駒はどれほど活躍
I could be wrong though.
しかし切り札はどんな力を発揮しようとも切れば確実に捨てられる。エンジェはそなたにとって実に良き切り札だったの。
エンジェの名を口にするんじゃな。
As Battler's angry roar, or at Battler's angry roar, Beato finally stopped talking.
俺はな、こんなところで遊んでる暇はもう一切ねえんだ。引き分けすらもエンジェを待たせてる。俺はな、お前を打ち破り家族を連れて家に帰るんだよ。てめえと魔女ごっこで遊んでる暇は1秒たりともありはしない。
ならばどうすればよいか分かっているの。
ああ、お前をぶっ倒す。魔女も魔法も幻想も妄想も全て俺がぶっ飛ばす。さあ追っ始めようぜ。もう二度とごまかさせない。ゲーム再開だぜ。お前という嘘っぱちを追う魔女のベールを俺が引き裂いてやる。
長いわ。素直に一言わらわを殺してやると言えばよい。
ああ、その言葉をお望みなら言ってやるさ。
Yeah, say it in red. The red truth, the red text.
俺が聞いてやるお前の望みで最初で最後のものだ。
感謝する。
お前を殺す。
Hey, he did say it in the red truth.
ならばよし、始めようぞバトラ。さあ魔女狩りの時間だ。わらわを追ってみろ、追い詰めてみろ、殺してみろ。わらわはそなたに期待している。妹の最後がそなたに何を与えたのか、それをわらわに見せてみよ。
上等だ。
Battler's cry burned the world with a white light. And if you opened your eyes amidst the darkness, the two of them could be seen in a rose garden. Interesting.
先手はどちらから。
俺だ。
潔し。
In the rose garden, beautiful rose petals danced. The color of those rose petals was red. Did the fact that they faced each other in this beautiful rose garden prove or make claim to a red single truth? That must be why the roses are red. But in the language of flowers, roses represent passion, not truth. The flower for truth is a forget-me-not, and that flower is blue.
俺の青き真実で全てをうがつ。
Oh hell yeah, now we're really messing with colors. Well, we'll wrap it up for this video because goddamn, I don't want to talk too much. You know, that would kill me and would probably upset all of you. But in the next video, we'll continue along here with the tea party, however much longer it's going to be taking us to get through it as we really try to wrap up this this fourth episode here. But thank you all for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all that fancy jazz, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Take it easy.